video on a quick watercolor tutorial for the Creative Eye project. A couple of things. We have two irises drawn up there as examples. We have a sketch of an eye, and then we have two bars drawn that we're going to use to do some watercolor techniques. That is some Presto whiteout that we'll use for highlights. And what we're going to be doing is looking at the wet on wet technique, and that is basically so you can get nice flat watercolors that really only works for small areas because watercolor naturally has textures. So we're going to start off with the irises above, and then as things dry we're going to move on to other phases. We're going to look at combining watercolor, color pencils, and ink. So when you're doing your wet on wet, you need to see what you're doing. So we call this dirty water, and basically you just make a very watered down version of whatever color you're going to use. And when you do this, the color will just flow over the paper to where you want it to be. If you don't use the dirty water, it's hard to see where that paint's going to go. The important thing is you don't want to have an excess amount of water. You just want to have enough to moisten the page and allow the color to glide over. So everything in this tutorial, same techniques. Again, wet on wet, dragging this entire thing down and creating a nice flat color. This one is going to be a gradient, and what you're going to do is load one area with color, clean off your brush, and then you're going to pull it down. Now this paper is the cheapest watercolor paper there is. We use this for doing tutorials because we do not want to waste the more expensive higher level watercolor. But again, we're going to see how we use this pull technique, where you're pulling the color with a clean brush and clean water, and that helps prevent hard edges and make nice blends between the darker values and lighter values. So right now with the eye, what we're going to be doing is we're laying in our values, and we're basically creating a map of where all our darker values are going to be and where all our lighter values are going to be. So when we paint over this, we can lay down our colors with confidence, and we know where we're putting the darker values in. So again, this is where we use that pull technique for the gradient. We clean the brush off and drag it down, and then that's how you get that nice fadeaway color. And we're going to be repeating that process pretty much throughout this whole tutorial. Now, once that's laid out, we want to make sure that we let that area dry. When we start adding the color pencil, the paper has to be completely dry. If it's even just damp or cool to the touch, it's not completely dry and the color pencils won't work. When we create darker values and shadows, never really use black. What we like to do is use natural grays. So what I'm doing is mixing orange and blue together. That's going to give you a nice grayish color. And then if you add more orange and less blue, you're going to get a nice rust color. While the blue and orange are not going to be equal, if you do mix it to where you have more of a balance between the two colors, you'll get a nice dark brown. All complementary colors do this, so this is orange and blue. You can do this with green and red or yellow and violet, but orange and blue tends to make the nicest colors. Okay, and now that this is dry, we're going over it with black ink and the color pencil. So the black ink is for the pupil, and what we're going to be doing is using some of those shading techniques that we did in the eye notes with the graphite pencil. We're going to use those same techniques, but we're going to be using color pencils. Now when I do these tutorials, I like to use colors that aren't natural because it kind of takes away the stress of trying to make something look real. So we don't want to get caught up and trying to make flesh tones or the eye look like it's done in flesh colors. So if we just pick normal colors, then we can just focus on technique and we don't really have to worry about that. So the reason we do this is we want to look at what the possibilities are with watercolor, color pencil, and ink. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to use these for your project, but it's nice to know what options you have. If you do decide to use the watercolor, you'll probably have to do some more practice. So all you have to do is ask for a couple more practice sheets. If you get to the point where you're doing this and the paper's quite not dry, so like if it's cool to the touch, you can take a blow dryer and speed up the process. And here, just using the whiteout to create the highlights for the irises. So now that we have our values mapped out, we can go in there fairly quickly and put in our dark values. One thing you're going to notice is dabbing with the paper towel or tissue. That is a way to prevent hard edges and to lift excess watercolor off. So you'll see that paper towel coming in quite a bit. And again, we're using that pull technique for that gradient to have those shadows blend into the highlights. It's important to pay attention to your references because your references will show you where your darker shadows are and where your highlights at. And once they're mapped out, it makes it a lot easier to start blending all of these in. And again, you can see that tissue paper is going to be coming in. So it is a tool, just like a paintbrush. And this next technique is just showing how to do like a bit of a controlled drip. So again, if you use the dirty water, once again, you can start making some drip patterns, and then what you do is you load that area up with color and water, and then you can tap it against the table, you can blow on it, you can use a straw and blow on the straw, and that'll help push that to a specific direction. And those are ways that you can create those little natural controlled bleeds if you wish to have it as a technique in your watercolor. This next one is creating clouds. So again, you take that dirty water and you roughly draw in organic roundish shapes. You try not to have a whole lot of control. You want to keep it as spontaneous as possible. And then when you start dropping the blue into it, it's only going to go to where the water was. To soften the edges so you don't have these harsh lines in your clouds, after you lay in your color, you can take a clean brush with water and trace the interior like I'm doing right now. And then you can go in with a little bit of tissue and that'll give you those nice soft pillowy edges versus a hard edge. And that's one way to create clouds or a cloud-like texture in a background. Okay, so now that this is dry, we can come in and start blending with our color pencils and adding some of our textures, adding some of our other values and gradients. And we use the same techniques for using color pencils as we would for shading with the graphite pencil. And we're just going to go through and start checking off all the spots, getting the eyelid in, getting the shadow of the eye indicated, and just working in and out of our shadows and our midtones and highlights. Sorry, I went off camera for a minute there. When we're done with this, before we go in and add the eyelashes, what I would do is on a separate piece of paper, I would practice doing the eyelashes a couple of times. I wouldn't go, once you spend this much time trying to render something, I wouldn't do eyelashes for the first time on this. So on a separate piece of paper, it's always a good idea to do 2 or 3 sets of eyelashes to get back into the groove. And then here you can see that we're using the same techniques. The black ink for the iris, we're doing the same shading techniques for rendering the iris, and now coming in and adding those eyelashes. So these are all things that we went over in the eye tutorial. And if you want to get really good at it, you have to do a bunch of them. And even when you get good at it, you still need to practice before you work on your final. And once you get to this point, now it's important to just really look at your drawing and think, okay, what did I miss? Is there details that I need to add? So here I'm adding some bit of shadow work. I'm adding some of those darker values. And it's important to really look at what you're doing and see if there's anything that you missed or that you can make slightly better. Now going in and adding the highlight. So I just want to emphasize again, this tutorial doesn't mean that watercolor is a requirement. Again, all I want to do is give people options and practice. So if you're going to do a pastel version of this project, you should really practice with pastels before committing to it for your final. If you like this, I would also recommend getting some more practice sheets and just do a bunch of little tiny practice drawings and paintings with the watercolor and the color pencil. That's the best way to get the hang of it. So that's it for the video. I hope this worked out for you, and till next time, have fun on the project.